Hi, Councilor McGovern.
Hello.
Hey. Can you hear me?
I can.
I can't hear you.
Can't hear me yet?
No.
I can hear you, Councilor.
I can't hear you.
Paula, I can hear, so I'm not sure if maybe the sound issue is on your end. Can you hear me?
I don't think she can hear any of us.
Councilor McGovern, we can hear you.
Maybe it's because Naomi.
Let me text her. Hold on.
Oh, she's calling you. Looks like.
Can I not hear Mark because of something you've done?
Can you hear me, Mark?
Yep.
I hear you.
So councilors, IT is just gonna go check for Paula what's happening with her sound. So it'll be maybe 2 minutes.
Mark, Wally's coming down to figure out why I can't hear you, but everybody else can. Mark, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, you can hear me now. Wally fixed it. Thanks, Wally.
Paula, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Counselor.
Okay.
It's 11 o'clock, Counselor, and you do have a quorum.
Okay. Great. Well, I'm getting some feedback. Is anyone else hearing it? Okay. Now it seems to be gone now. Okay. All right. Excuse me. Quorum of the Human Services and Veterans Committee being present, I call today's meeting of June 30th, 2021 to order. The call of the meeting is to discuss after-school programming by DHSP for the fall. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, adopted by Massachusetts General Assembly and approved by the Governor, the city is authorized to use remote participation at meetings of the Cambridge City Council and its committees. In addition to having members of the council participate remotely, We have also set up Zoom teleconference for public comment, and Zoom is primarily being used for public comment. In order to watch the meeting, please tune into channel 22 or visit the open meeting portal on the city's website. If you would like to provide public comment, please visit the City Council section of the city's webpage. Instructions for how to sign up to speak are posted there. Once you have completed the sign-up procedure, you will receive a link to the Zoom meeting. We will not allow any additional public comment sign-ups after 11:30 p.m. Madam Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilor McGovern,
Present and audible.
Vice Mayor Mallon,
Present and audible.
Councilor Nolan,
Present and audible.
Councilor Simmons, absent. Councilor Simmons, absent. Councilor Toomey,
Present and audible, and Mr. Chair, it's 11:30 a.m. or p.m.
Did I say PM?
You said p.m., 11:30 a.m.
Oh. We might
You have
be,
a quorum.
I don't think we'll be here that long.
You have a quorum with 4 members present.
Thank you. And just to point out for folks watching, the members of this committee, as we just took part in the roll call, Vice Mayor Mallon, Councilor Simmons, Councilor Toomey, and Councilor Nolan. We are also joined by Councilor Zondervan, Councilor Sabrina Wheeler, and Mayor Siddiqui, who are also joining us today from the council. All votes today, if any, will be taken by roll call. I do want to, before we jump in and I lay this out about today and how we're going to proceed, I do want to say we did receive an email from some of the from the nonprofit coalition asking about our out-of-school time partners and nonprofit providers who are integral to out-of-school time opportunities in the city of Cambridge and why they were not here at the table. And I just want to explain that this meeting was really called due to questions and concerns that were raised in the community specifically about DHSP. It's not a general meeting about all the after-school programs in the city of Cambridge, of which there are many, and many absolutely fantastic ones. My twins are avid participants at the East End House. And so I just wanted to explain that it was not meant to be in any way a slight to those programs. Those programs are fantastic and integral to our work, but this was really specific to issues around the city that people wanted to get more information on. And that's why we're focusing on DHSP programs. So I just wanted to make that clear. We are going to the agenda. We're going to go to Ellen Semenoff and her crew, who have a presentation to talk about the city programs and to try and address some of those concerns that have been raised in the community. We will then go to public comment, and then we will go to committee discussion. So with that, I will turn it over to Assistant City Manager Ellen Semenoff.
Thank you so much. And I'm here with my colleague, Michelle Farnham, who's the Assistant Director for Children, Youth, and Families, and oversees all of our child and youth serving programs. And we'll both do a portion of the presentation. I believe that Naomi has, thank you, Naomi, has our brief. I think we just need to go back. Let's see, there we go. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to provide more information about our programs for the fall. Next slide, please. I wanted to start by saying we really appreciate all of the wonderful things that were said by the families who signed on to that petition in there, and also in other communications to the City Council and School Committee about their experiences in our programs, and also about the commitment of our staff to their children. We also appreciate how deeply challenging this year has been for all of those families, for all of their children, and for all of the people who work with children. I wish we'd been able to provide more information earlier to families. And we do understand that as families needed to return to work, the uncertainties about whether families would have access to an after-school program is a consuming concern. We will give you all the information we have at the moment, and we'll also let you know when we have more information that when it will be available. This is also a year in which our staff created and recreated programs all year long. When the schools closed in March, as many of you know, those of you who were in many of our programs, most of our programs continued reaching out and working with children and youth. We created a brand new virtual and on-field program for the summer for elementary school and middle school students. We created virtual internship programs for teens and served over 700 teens in virtual programming through the Mayor's Summer Youth Employment Program. We reopened our preschools in August. We were the first ones in the schools to meet the needs of families who wanted their children in person. During the fall and winter, many of our staff work with the schools in supporting children during the day and before and after school. We created new virtual programs for elementary school students and an internship program for middle school students. I won't go through everything we've done, but I just want to make sure that no one thinks that the staff of this department have not been working nonstop to try to meet the needs of children and youth. I understand that many families are not happy with some of the choices we made in what we did and didn't do. And I also understand that getting information in a timely fashion is really important. As you know, this summer, as many of you know, we're operating 12 different summer camps, some in partnership with the schools and some on our own. We heard via the City Council and School Committee about concerns that families had about not being able to attend the programs that they had attended in the past because of our new partnership programs. And we appreciate that it was really hard for families not to have information about the summer programs earlier. I am confident that there are ways we could have communicated better. I want to be clear about that. But I also want to make sure that people understand that as the same people were managing and running programs all across the year, these were the same people planning and creating new programs and creating brand new partnerships with the schools that we think are of great service to children and families. And all of that impacted our ability to make timely decisions, which of course impacted our ability to communicate that information to you in a timely fashion. So I just want to indicate we understand that we failed you in some ways, and I am confident we could have done better, but I'm also fairly certain that we were really hampered in our ability to be able to do that. Next slide, please. We understand that there are 4 main areas of concern that the families who signed petition and others who've been communicating to the City Council and School Committee. And that's hearing a commitment to have the same capacity for all DHSP out of school time programs as we had in October 2019, with an option to make programs available to all who need it. To inform families of the licensed childcare after school who were enrolled in March of 2020 on the status of their enrollment and the process for enrolling additional children. Communication to families of community schools, youth centers, and after school childcare about the start dates of our program for the fall and about any enrollment changes. And support families whose children were enrolled in the CAPI program at the Cambridgeport School to have after-school options available in September. We also received late last night an additional list of questions that we will attempt to answer here as well. Next slide, please. Let me start by saying we anticipate that we will have the same capacity in September of 2021 as we had pre-pandemic. So I want to acknowledge that the school department, and particularly Jim Maloney, who I believe is here today, who took this on with us, have been incredibly supportive in ensuring that we will have access to all of the spaces that we had in 2019. Every school principal received a list from him of all of the spaces that we had occupied so that they were aware that the spaces needed to be allocated to us again. To be honest, our real challenge at this point is ensuring that we have adequate staff in September for all of our programs, and we will be working hard to make that happen. As you may know, and I suspect that many of the parents here do know, that prior to the pandemic, there was insufficient capacity in the system to serve all of the elementary school children whose families wanted access to those programs. There are roughly 3,600 elementary school children, and there were about 1,200 slots through city programs and about 350, including CAPI, run by the not-for-profit community in schools or in freestanding centers. And I'm talking about the programs that operate every afternoon, as opposed to the many wonderful programs that offer a more limited but still incredibly valuable resource to families. So we entered this pandemic with room daily in our collective city and community programs for only a little more than 40% of the children in our elementary schools. While more children than that were served because some of the programs, a family might go for one day, or a family might go for 1 hour on several days. So more children may have been served, but the actual daily capacity is about 40% of the number of elementary school students. And it's not surprising that the pandemic has impacted both for the summer and potentially for the school year, the capacity of many programs. As families who've looked for summer programs know, city and community programs are operating many summer programs, but many camp programs that operated in the past are not being operated this summer, or they opened remotely, which we know from families may not meet their needs. Many programs, including our own, are still scrambling some for staff for programs that open this week or will open next week. I think all of you know that the people who work with your children were also deeply impacted by the pandemic as well. Some of them left their jobs during the year and others are not returning. So we have a systemic problem, which is not unique to Cambridge, which is that there have never been an adequate number of slots to serve all of the children in Cambridge whose families want to send them to programs. Many, many years ago, when my children were in the Cambridge Public Schools and we looked for after-school childcare, the same problem existed. Not as severe as it is today, but this is a problem that has existed for a long time. In Massachusetts, the data suggests that only about 25% of families are able to access out-of-school time programs that meet their needs. And the pandemic, as you all know, highlighted here, as it did everywhere, the disparities by income and race that have often left lower income families with fewer opportunities. Some of the challenges for families have been the cost of programs. Some have been the knowledge about programs, and some have been other barriers to access. So I want to be clear that post-pandemic, we have a lot of work to do as a community with the Agenda for Children, with the school department, with our critically important community partners, and with families to look at how we might over time increase the availability of out-of-school time programs. This year, the Agenda for Children through the school department added a new position through the schools for an elementary school network. And as part of that process, And there's a deep commitment there to hear the voices of families, especially the voices of families that haven't been heard as much as before. But expanding capacity and redesigning programs to meet family needs is not a short-term solution. I need to be clear that we will not by September have more capacity within the system than we had pre-pandemic. All of us who provide out-of-school time programs are working hard to ensure that we will have the same capacity as we had pre-pandemic. Next slide, please. We recognize that the pandemic had deep impacts, both in the academic and social emotional health for children. And we know that our programs and other programs are critical to children, and that our spaces and their spaces are often the places where children are best supported to build deep connections to other children and to the adults who work with them. Partnering with the schools this summer on the 4 sites really meant that many more low-income children were served in full-day programs than have been true before within our programs. In years past, many children that the schools hoped would attend academic and other support programs were unable to attend those programs because they were just half-day, or because any transportation provided by the schools happened just at 11:30 with no provision at the end of the day. This year, the schools in partnership have made it possible for about 300 children to be engaged in full day programming and to get transportation home at the end of the day. Most but not all of the children being served are those eligible for free and reduced lunch. So it has significantly shifted who's being served in these programs this summer. I want to be clear that we will continue to serve families across the income spectrum, at the same time that we are prioritizing programs to meet the needs of low-income families. We expect to build on our partnership with the schools to ensure that we continue to be able to support more low-income children in our programs. We also need to hear more from families whose children have not been in our programs, as well as those who have, to make sure that our programs are designed in ways that can meet their needs. And I want to repeat that we need more capacity in the system to meet the needs of all families. And until we get there, we need to ensure that the city and the community programs are accessible and affordable to families who've previously been left out. Our move to a sliding fee scale, rather than providing individual scholarships, is part of our effort to change how we support all families. As many, certainly of the city councilors know, and I suspect many of the families know, we were successful in making those changes in our preschools, and we expect to build on that for all of our after-school programs. Next slide, please. I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague, Michelle Farnham.
Thank you, Ellen, and thanks for having me and for us to have the opportunity to communicate, as Ellen said, what we know and what we're planning in the future. So to address the question that was raised about the communicating with families who had been enrolled in our licensed after-school programs in March of 2020, we have communicated with the families to let them know that they have slots for the fall if they want them. And so right now we are collecting that information as to who still wants their slot, so that we can begin that re-enrollment process, which typically happens in May each year. And so once we have solidified the who still wants their slots, we then will know what additional openings we have, and we will be enrolling additional children in those openings once we have secured who wants to continue in the slots that they had. One of the things that we are working on is to expand our sliding fee scale, similar to the one that we created for preschool, which allowed us to deeply subsidize lower income families and also not increase the already pretty low rates of our preschools for the families who are at or below 100% of median income. And so we are working now to take that same scale and apply it to our after school tuition rates. And so our hope is that for September, we will have that for our after school families as well. Next slide, Naomi. Thank you. So another question that was raised was about the start dates and enrollment information for our community schools and youth center programs. And so we are expecting that all of our after school programs will begin on the first day of school. That has been true for the youth centers forever and was new, I believe, what year now? 2019 for the community schools. So that is what we plan. In terms of the enrollment date, so in the past, the youth center enrollment has always happened in August, and it is our plan that it will roll out in August again. And that for community schools in the past has always happened the first or second week of September. And there had been jumpstart weeks for some programs that for previously enrolled children the first week of camp. And so we are actually planning to move that earlier this year. And so as we said, pre-pandemic, that never happened until the first week of September. So one thing that has changed because of the pandemic, it had been planned pre-pandemic, and then the pandemic made us move it up, is that our application process for all of our programs will be happening online. So for the past year, we rolled out a new enrollment system where families register online. And so we will be rolling out when our enrollment session opens, it'll be online for all of our programs. And as I mentioned before, our plan is to have the sliding fee scale for community schools and youth centers in the same way that we will have for after school, and that was done this summer for the first time for our camp programs. And so this will be the same scale across all of our programs, and tuition will be based on a family's income and family size. Next slide, please. And so the support for the CAPI families who had been enrolled in the program at the Cambridgeport school. We know with this program closing, it creates great insecurity and questions for the families for the Cambridgeport school. And we are now working closely with the principal. We've met with her twice in trying to figure out what are some possible solutions. And we have been talking about what are ways in which in our current system, we could support the families that had previously been enrolled so that they have an after-school option. And we've been talking about what are ways in which we can adjust the enrollment numbers at the existing community school at Cambridgeport. We've also looked at how we can offer spaces for families that were previously enrolled in some of our other DHSP programs. So for example, at the youth center, that is 1 block away. And what are ways in which we could partner with community-based programs to also offer some support. And so we are exploring those options now. And based on our meetings with the principal, have heard that in her meetings with the the families, that they are also exploring options outside of working with DHSP that we want to figure out how we can support as well. And, you know, our goal is to be able to offer some options for families that had previously been enrolled in a new way. So, thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. I just want to address a couple of other questions that we didn't address during the presentation that came from the families last evening. I think we perhaps adequately addressed this, but just the question about how will we ensure that cost is not a barrier for families? And I think, but just to be clarify and make sure people understand, we believe that the sliding fee scale is the way to ensure that cost is not a barrier for families. And so that's our proposal. That's what we have been planning to do. There's a question here about health and safety manual that I'll be honest with you, I didn't 100% understand the question, but I shared the question with Mr. Maloney, and he said that he would be able to try to address that. There's a question about whether we would be able to use state and federal COVID funds. I'll be honest, I'm not aware of any state COVID funds that we've received as a city that are possibly used for this purpose. With respect to the federal funds, I think the city council and the city manager have been engaged in conversations about what are some of the possible uses of the new federal funds. And I think we will most certainly explore the area of whether, particularly for low-income families, and whether it's for city programs or community programs, whether it's possible to make use of those funds to ensure better access for families. I think the question about whether it's possible for us to create a more unified experience, both in capacity and cost structure across all Cambridge schools. It's a great question and a complicated answer, but let me give you sort of a first piece of that. The amount, the available space in each school is somewhat different. And so I think it is our goal to be able, as we've described today, to have a more unified system about the way we enroll families, about the way we charge families. But I would say that the issue about capacity in different schools is actually a part of the longer planning conversation, that it's critically important that we have both with the schools, with the community programs, and with the city programs, and with families, so that over time we can expand capacity of all the programs. And then finally, I think the last one is was perhaps the criticism of the lack of our transparency, and a request for us to be more transparent and to engage with families in our planning. I think it's very clear that as we think about planning going forward for where can we be a year from now, engaging with a whole range of families is going to be critically important. And I guess one thing I would say, and I don't mean to sound critical here, because if people don't contact you and tell you what their concerns are, then you have to look at why they're not contacting you. So I want to be clear. The fact that for the most part, families communicate with the school committee, communicate with the city council. Weeks later, I would learn of something that, because a school committee member would send it to me. Very rarely have parents, in the preschool changes, we have parents calling all the time. Megan White, who oversees all of our licensed programs, talked to lots of families. Michelle Farnham talked to lots of families. I talked to lots of families. But for the most part, I would say over the course of the last year, it was families testifying at the school committee or sending letters to the school committee. And sometimes we learned about it and sometimes we didn't. And so I think it's important, as I said, there must be a reason that families didn't think if they contacted our program leaders or Michelle or me, that they would get a satisfactory answer. But I just want to say that I hope that as we move forward, it's fine to keep the city council or school committee in the loop, but I feel like there are conversations we could have. And then if you're not satisfied with our answers, by all means, use every vehicle you have to try to get answers that you want. So I think that addresses the questions that we've received so far.
Okay, excuse me. Thank you, Assistant Manager Semenoff and Ms. Farnham. I think what we're going to do now, we have about 10 people, I believe, signed up for public comment. So we will go there. You will have 3 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record. And I assume Ms. Crane or Ms. Stefan will run the names because I don't have them. Yes. Okay. Well. All right. Let's start. Elsie Hang is the first speaker.
Sorry, Councilor McGovern.
Sorry, can folks hear me all right? I mean,
delay. Elsie Huang has not joined.
Oh.
We will go to Gal Kober. Gal Kober, unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yep, please go ahead.
So I happen to know that Elsie has joined, but I can also read what she was supposed to read. So we are both Cambridgeport parents. I live on 4 Newton Street, and I will read the letter from CAPI Parents. We are a group of parents, caregivers, and community members writing to request support from DHSP to address a crisis in after-school care at Cambridgeport School. As a direct result of financial pressures associated with the COVID-19 epidemic, and the CAPI program is closing. As you know, the CAPI program was started in 1993 to provide families with on-site after-school care from September to June without gaps until 6:30 p.m., including early release days. For all of those reasons, it has been an indispensable resource for working families. CAPI enrolled over 50 children each year and regularly had a wait list. The recent announcement that CAPI will close means that dozens of families need new after-school childcare options on short notice. And although we expect that the Cambridgeport Community School on site will continue offering enrichment programming for children next fall, it also has historically been oversubscribed. Moreover, many families need an affordable on-site after-school program that runs late enough for working parents to pick children up and is open for the entire school year. The Cambridgeport Community School cannot meet the needs of all families in our community. In a survey of Cambridgeport school families, we have identified 105 JK through 5th grade children in need of after-school care for next fall. We believe that the closure of CAPI on short notice, along with decreased capacity at other independently run after-school programs across the city that might otherwise pick up the slack, justifies emergency intervention by DHSP. Many of the off-site independently run after-school programs enroll students aged 5 and up and cannot enroll JK students, for example. DHSP currently operates after-school programs at 4 other elementary schools, FMA, MLK, Morse, and Peabody, and an extended day program at King Open. These programs offer both the seamless care families need and a sliding fee scale for tuition to account for all levels of family income. Extending operations to available classroom space at Cambridgeport would be the most feasible solution for this crisis in our school community. For the reasons identified above, we request that in addition to the Cambridgeport Community School, DHS offer an after-school program on-site at Cambridgeport School or priority access to other DHSP after-school programming during the 2021-22 school year. This letter has been signed by 115 members of our community representing over 70 families. And we are happy to hear that you are aware of our issues and working on them, but we wanted to represent our deep need and ask for your assistance. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Naomi, I see that Elsie she actually looks like she's in twice.
Elsie is going to be the next speaker, Mr.
Okay.
Counselor.
Thank you.
Elsie Huang? You have the
Elsie,
floor.
if you can unmute yourself.
Hello,
Hello.
you can hear me now? Okay. I think Gal was able to read the majority of our letter, but we wanted to again thank people on the City Council and in the DHSP offices for working closely with our principal on this. And we look forward to hearing more about the plans later this summer. And we're really glad that we've made the agenda here today. And we thank you so much for your time and your efforts. I'm gonna cede my time now.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Aaron Shakal.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you all very much. Once again, my name is Aaron Shakow. I also live at 4 Newton Street and am a Cambridgeport parent of a rising second grader, Leo. We heard about the closure of CAPI due to COVID-related financial pressures on May 30th. So for the last month, and only a month, we've really just been trying to, address a crisis that is going to hit in September. And as people who run after-school programs and other programming for school-age children, I'm sure you appreciate what that means for the parents. The closure of CAPI, we think, presents 3 questions that we wanted to pose to the staff of DHSP, to the Cambridge Public Schools representatives who are in attendance, and to the City Council. The first question is one that that has been addressed already in this hearing, but we would appreciate some kind of specifics about what the prospects for actually having after-school programming for the children in our school community in September are going to be, and what the elements are likely to be. We've talked with Principal Jean-Michel about what might be happening, but we'd be grateful for any detail that you can provide. The second question, I think, is what the long-term prospects for replacing the CAPI program are going to be, and how we can involve DHSP in that process. It seems clear to us that a real precarity in after-school programming all over the city has been exposed by the fact that that this program could fold, on such short notice. I wonder if perhaps the City Council or other administrators could address, this larger problem of the level of precarity in after-school, access to after-school care for parents in the public school system, and what the prospects for increasing the capacity of the existing programs is, specifically DHSP, in the long term, beyond the emergency that we have for this year in the Cambridgeport community. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your answers.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Sarah Sikowitz.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Sikowitz. I live at 177 Pemberton Street and am the parent of 2 children at the PBD school. Thank you to the committee and those on this call for participating in this meeting. I am part of the group of families who submitted the questions, and many of our questions have been answered, and I'm thankful for that. I'm also incredibly grateful for what you have offered this year for our children. It is great to hear that DHSP will be able to offer after-school care and programming options at pre-pandemic levels this fall. I'm also hopeful that DHSP and the Cambridge Public Schools will be able to use this restart as an opportunity to partner with families to understand and address the barriers that have existed in the past to work towards out-of-school programming that meets the needs of families across Cambridge. It sounds like that is a longer-term goal, and we are very excited to partner with you. Thank you again, especially to Ellen and Michelle, for your transparency and your open communication on this matter.
The next speaker is Emmy Michaud Weinstock.
Emmy, you have the floor.
Hi, my name is Emmy Michaud Weinstock. Though I spoke to this issue previously, I wasn't reached out to by city council members to provide questions beforehand. So I'm hoping that I too can get my answers and recommendations acted on. I hope potentially I could get more than 3 minutes. So I'm going to talk to transparency. This continues to be an issue for all municipal departments, and DHSP is not unique. Yeah, there are issues about DHSP offering what their summer programs are, but this is a larger issue. It is reflected on who is here to make these statements, and it's reflected in which caregivers know about what is offered and when it's offered and how to gain access. The track system is a mess. The process is misleading and disempowering to the marginalized. What is this committee going to do to change that? The committee needs to create policy that either makes changes to that system with a priority of access for Black and Brown families and families experiencing poverty. Information needs to go out to Black and Brown families first. They are the families that have the hardest time pivoting. Get to them and let them have access first. What type of policies are going to be created about that? Speaking of getting to these families first, there are current practices that are used to do outreach now for Black and Brown families and families experiencing poverty and other access, but those are obviously not working. What is the committee going to push as a policy? What is DHSP going to do to change those practices? As a Black caregiver and member of the Cambridge Families of Color, my baseline is that the high priority caregivers of color get the power to create the table, sit at the table, and dictate what actions happen at the table. That's where transparency comes from. Those families need to be the ones making the decision. The city council does not create policy for the people create policy that the city listens to and then acts upon. For every privileged caregiver that is at the table asking these questions, there should be 3 high priority caregivers of color that are gaining access also to ask these questions. The discussion starting point needs to switch, with the baseline starting from an anti-racist and equitable lens. This means that high priority families that have been and continue to be marginalized should have the majority of spaces, meaning that instead of 40% of those spaces reserved, there is 60% that they are getting and 40% to privileged families. Those families should not need to qualify for scholarships or sliding fees. Why do families experience poverty need to have a sliding scale? When we change the dynamic to one with an anti-racist lens, we say that Black, Brown, and families experiencing poverty are lifted first, and we stop upholding systems that have benefited those who benefit from white privilege through racism and classism. There must be courage to change these policies. Pay staff more. If you're going to expand these programs, pay them more to make sure that they're sustainable. We want to talk about CAPI at Cambridgeport, where as a caregiver, as a privileged caregiver of color, I was asked me if I knew how to access those spaces. Asked me if other caregivers of color that have barriers to access knew that they needed to stand in line and provide their forms first thing in the morning. Asked me how many Black and Brown families were able to access these programs, how many of the CAPI
Emmy?
parents are high prioritized.
Hi, Emmy, your time has run out. Is there a motion to allow Ms. Weinstock an additional minute?
So moved.
On that motion, roll call?
On the motion to add an additional minute, Councilor McGovern,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Mallon,
Yes.
Councilor Nolan,
Yes.
Councilor Simmons, Absent Counselor Toomey?
Yes.
And the motion is adopted on the affirmative vote with 4 in favor.
Thank you. Ms.
Thank you.
Weinstock, go ahead.
Thank you so much. So I'll go back to, there's a push to create more spaces, more programming. Are you going to pay staff more? If you're going to make promises to creating programming, make promises to pay staff more. If you want to retain and hire more so that expanded programs are being talked about right now can actually happen in a more sustainable way. I'm going to go to my CAPI comment again. Ask me if other caregivers of color that have barriers to access knew that they needed to stand in line and provide their forms. Ask me how many Black and brown families were able to access those programs. How many of the 50 parents were high priority in families of color. This program has been in crisis for Black and brown families before letter writing parents decided to make their demands. What will be done to address the already existing and continued crisis for Black and brown families experiencing poverty? Thank you. I appreciate the extra time.
The next speaker is Matthew Liviano.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. So this is my first time ever doing public comment in Cambridge. So I appreciate the council's time and everybody listening. We are a new family to Cambridge. We joined King Open. We have a rising 4th grader and a rising 2nd grader at King Open. And we obviously only experienced King Open through the lens of COVID because this is our first year. But I was disappointed when I finally found out about the after school program through one of the parents who organizes. And it seemed like there was a lot of priority being given to previous families and then rising pre-K and maybe some other priorities as well. But I didn't see anything about having some open spaces for new families. And I know there's a lot of new families, even within our class, that just moved to Cambridge this year and are brand new and would like access to the program, but maybe haven't even heard about it or any details. And so I was hoping that the organizers would consider reserving a few spaces for new students who were not in the Cambridge system before and didn't have any prior access to the after school program. That is it. Thank you.
The next speaker is Derek Etkin.
Hello. Hello. My name is Derek Edkin. I live at 109 Clay Street in Cambridge. We have a rising Rock 6th grader and a rising 2nd grader at Peabody School. I want to echo some of the statements people have said about we appreciate this hearing and the effort to be more transparent and engaging with families and answering our questions. Appreciate that. And I'm hopeful that moving forward, engagement with families is something that can happen in a more regular way to try to figure out what's working and what's not working. I would also add that or suggest that maybe talking with some of the more successful community schools and the staff there as to what has worked. We are, as I'm hearing about the experiences of families and other that are served by other community schools, I'm realizing what an exceptional program has been built by some of the leaders and the staff at the Fitzgerald School in our neighborhood. That may be due to particular capacities that they have in terms of space, but I've also watched, excuse me, the staff there make like an extra effort to connect with Black and brown families in particular, both in terms of the staffing and in terms of connecting with the families. It's a really special thing that we have in the community school here in Cambridge. It's one of the unfortunately limited, like truly integrated spaces that we have. And I'm hoping that the DHSP as a system can learn from some of the community outreach and really like organizing that's happening at the Fitzgerald School. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Maya Gonzalez.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hi, my name is Maya Gonzalez. I'm a retired educator and I currently live in East Cambridge. I've already been in conversations with Michelle Farnham and her staff about my concerns, and it's obvious that she shares them. I'm commenting today so that the City Council can also have some information regarding my concerns. My granddaughter Annalise is 14, and for the last 3 years has been in a substantially separate ASD, Autism Spectrum Disorder classroom at the Cambridge Street Upper School. Annalise is very social and thrives when she is able to participate in out-of-school and after-school activities where she can interact with her friends and classmates. Having those opportunities to generalize social skills in an authentic environment positively impact her overall development. Sadly, Annalise has not been able to participate in any OST or after-school program for the last 4 years because there is a long waiting list for inclusion facilitators. Since these supports are only provided until age 14, she has now aged out. In September, Annalise will begin high school at Cambridge Range and Latin and continue there for the next 8 years until she's 22. Unless equitable OST options are made available, she will not be able to benefit from the recreational and social activities other CRLS students enjoy. After retiring from teaching in 2012, I became Annalise's daily after-school caregiver so that my daughter, her mother, could finish college and work. I am now in my 70s and running out of energy. My daughter recently decided to quit her job because she was concerned about how caregiving responsibilities were affecting my health. Other families of disabled students are faced with similar challenges. The limited availability of adequate and appropriate after-school options impacts many parents' ability to work full-time. Families of non-disabled children are seldom forced to make the difficult choice between working or being at home after school to supervise their children. Some parents of exceptional children find themselves part of the working poor or dependent on state support simply because they don't have after-school options which are available to other parents. In early March, I reached out to the Department of Human Service Programs Assistant Director, Michelle Farnham. Later in March and again in April, we met online with a group that included folks from DHSP and the Agenda for Children and CPAC. I described the impacts and requested that a working group be established with a mandate to establish barriers to access and make recommendations for improvements. Meaningful change will require input from and the participation of all stakeholders and buy-in from policymakers. We are hoping that DHSP, CPSD, and the city will work with us to seek solutions. I have 2 more sentences, okay?
Okay, yeah, please finish up. Thank you.
Parents, caregivers, and students should always have a seat at the table when barriers to inclusion and access are being discussed. We must lead conversations about and find solutions to problems which are not always evident to those who are not personally affected. There are steps that a working group committed to change will need to do in order to adequately address issues of equitable access. And I would be glad to share that with you in written form.
Thank you.
Yes.
The next speaker is Vanessa Azzoni.
Hi, thank you so much for giving me the chance to talk. I just want to echo the statement of another speaker and just explain my situation. I'm the mother of a rising first grader at Morse, and I'm completely new to the system, although I've been a resident of Cambridge for almost 20 years, but I didn't grow up here, as you can tell from my accent. So I'm learning about the system. And I think for me, it's been really, really hard trying to find an after-school program for my daughter. And of course, last year there was nothing. And even now, trying to figure out how this system works is very hard. So I echo the statement of somebody who spoke before me, that if you're not in the system and there is no information about how you get into the system, how you get a spot, it becomes very hard. And I know it's not only my case. I talked to other parents, and of course, with COVID was very hard. But if you don't even know where to find information, how to enroll, I definitely welcome the online system. But I think there should be more information on what is available, how you enroll. Like even getting information about this meeting, I got information at the last moment from our family liaison, and I think will be really great if for all the new family of the new kids coming in, there will be more of that shared, so that we can learn what is available, how we can get our kids in and not scramble at the last moment with different options and and trying to figure out, because I know with COVID it's been really tough trying to find something. And probably I'm a family that is lucky that can find something or take some time off here and there, but it's definitely been a big burden for our mental health, our for everything. And so I would really appreciate if something can be done to share more information and provide more access to the new family that are coming into the system, not only the one that were already there in 2019. Thank you so much for all your help.
And the final speaker, Councilor McGovern, is Rachel Grashow.
Hi, thank you. Right, this is Rachel. I live at 107 Ridge Avenue. The original aggregated email was sent from me. I first want to thank all the addressees on that email who got back to me, who made time to speak to me, all the parents and caregivers that I spoke to and have gotten to know over the last few weeks. I'd say everything has happened very fast. I also want to acknowledge the incredible strain that DHSP has been under. We've all been under it, but I know the incredible programming that came out was not easy to put together, and I want to acknowledge all the work that you're going through, even as your families experience the strain of COVID. In this process, I've learned a lot, as I said, partially about how variable the programs are from school to school, within schools, within communities. And that's one of the toughest things to get my mind around, is that there's satisfaction and happiness with one program in one place for some families and not in others. And I think that's one of the things I'd love to see addressed. I don't have time to say all the things I would like to say, but the one piece that stands out to me here is the critical need for some sort of caregiver parent committee. Emmy said this before, I think others have said it. I think it was in one of the questions that were posed, but I would be happy to work with DHSP. I mean, as a white privileged parent, I really support the idea of a parent caregiver DHSP committee that works together, but that is on the caregiver parent side, that overrepresents marginalized families. I agree with that. I think that's the way we address this. And I think ideas about how to get this information out into the community better, ideas about people who can test drive the track system. I think there's ways that we would all benefit from that working together. I think the programming would be better. I think the positivity and communication would be really improved with a committee like that I think we can get into place relatively quickly, just to build on what I see today as an incredibly positive and community-minded approach towards addressing some of the problems that were there before COVID, but that COVID has really unearthed and highlighted for us. So again, I want to say thanks. I want to say to DHSP and to other families, please call on me to help out in ways that I can. I think this is key to making Cambridge what it was always meant to be. So thanks.
Thank you. So that is all who has signed up for public comment on a motion by Vice Mayor Mallon to close public comment. Roll call.
On closing public comment, Councilor McGovern?
Yes.
Yes. Vice Mayor Mallon?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Nolan?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Simmons? Absent. Councilor Toomey?
Yes.
And public comment is closed on the affirmative vote with 4 in favor.
Okay, great. Thank you. We're also joined by Jim Maloney from the school department, who's going to be here to help answer questions. I'm going to go to committee members first, start with the Vice Mayor and then Councilor Nolan. Vice Mayor Mallon, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair McGovern, and thank you to Ellen and Michelle for not only being here today and providing a lot of the information that was requested, but for working with Councilor McGovern and myself over the past couple of weeks on putting this together, and also for being open and receptive to the issues over at CAPI at the Cambridgeport School. I know that you guys have been really working hard on trying to find a solution there, so I'm grateful. I did have a couple of questions on the presentation. The first one for DHSP after schools. I understand that all the families have been, the families that were enrolled in March of 2019 have been informed that they have a space and that they will be enrolling for any openings that aren't taken in August. Is that a lottery, or do families have a place in line? How will families be chosen for those open spots?
Thanks for that, Alana. Our process includes, our long time process includes, and it's something that we will be looking at going forward, but we have had a wait list for after school programs in the past. And so the way that our enrollment process goes, once we have identified who will be continuing on in their spots from year to year, we enroll DHSP preschool children who are moving up, and then we work from the wait list to fill those remaining spots. So that is, we are continuing our same process this year for this year's enrollment.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. I guess my second point is sort of a theme that has been coming up, not just in this meeting, but in conversations that we've been having recently around the community schools, after schools, and sort of their origin and genesis of being an enrichment type program. That was sort of how they were set up. That was how they were envisioned, that parents could, drop their kids on a Tuesday afternoon for ballet or Friday afternoon for art class. That wasn't the way that I used the after school programs at the community schools. And I think there needs to be sort of a discovery of how people are using the community schools after school. How I used them was Monday through Friday, 2 to 5:30. I didn't care whether they were in clown acrobatics or running around the Tobin field for 45 minutes. They just needed a place to be right after school and a safe place where I understood that they were being taken care of. So I think trying to figure out, is that program model working for working families? Because what I think we're seeing from the CAPI parents is, what was great about CAPI was it started on that first day. It was available for half days, and it wasn't an enrichment program. It was an after school program. So one of the other things that's been coming up, I think, this afternoon is the need for some kind of maybe parent advisory group to DHSP to talk about, the different programs that happen across the city, both whether they're working for families in the way that they were originally intended, and are there disparate different programs? What are the best practices over at the PBD school after school or the Cambridgeport after school, and how do we translate that into a more uniform after school experience with DHSP? So I think putting together some kind of parent advisory board, particularly if you are doing that sort of long-term planning on how are we going to make sure that our Black and brown families or our low-income families get that priority and have that say. So I'm throwing my weight behind that idea and concept because I think it's a good one. My other question, and then I'll hand it off to see there's a bunch of other hands up from committee members. I did go online this morning to the job postings for DHSP, and I noticed that the job postings that are online right now are summer postings. And one of the things that Ms. Semenoff said at the very beginning was, yes, we are aiming to have the capacity, full capacity community schools, if that we have the staffing to support that. So I'm curious, it's almost July. When does DHSP expect that those job postings would go live in order to hire for community schools in September to ensure that we have that full capacity?
Seminoff, is that you? Yeah.
Sure. I would say we're working on we need to post positions in our youth centers, positions in our after-school childcare, and positions for our community schools. And again, little bit, confess the capacity-related issues. The very people who are part of re-looking at our job descriptions to make sure that we have what we need are the very people who are managing getting our programs off the ground next week. And so this is a capacity related issue at the moment, but we believe we need to get them up now because if we're going to fill those positions and recruit for those positions, we need to do it now.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to Ms. Seminoff. Yeah, I know that there's a huge capacity issue, and DHSP is getting up and running on those summer programs, and I noticed that some of the summer job listings are still up and running. So I think it will a considerable peace of mind on everybody's end. If those job postings are up, we can get that staffing up, given that the schools have committed to the space, and make sure that we can serve the community members that we need to serve. And I look forward to the resolution on the CAPI program and whether or not DHSP can serve some of those families and what alternatives will be for families who aren't going to be served within the Cambridge Court School. The Moses Youth Center for 4th and 5th graders, that is an excellent idea, but it does sound like the need is for that JK, the real little kids who you want to be able to keep in the building. And I know that you know that. So again, I appreciate the conversation. I'm going to yield back at this time. Thank you to Ellen and Michelle for being here this morning.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councilor Nolan, then I will check in with Councilor Toomey as he's a member of the committee to see if he has comments or questions, and then we will go to Councilor Zondervan and Councilor Sabrina Wheeler.
Mr. Chair, I'm all set.
You're all set? Okay. Councilor
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair McGovern. Thank you, Vice Mayor, for asking some of the questions that were on my list as well. I really do appreciate and echo the thanks of the staff who've worked tirelessly on this across every level and for the city to be providing this. And also, Chair McGovern, Vice Mayor Mellon, I know you've spent some time on this, and particularly the parents for just doggedly pursuing and reminding us all the importance of this. I too remember that anxiety as a parent when I desperately needed care and there was not the coverage that we needed as working parents. What I heard earlier is that we know that we need eventually a seamless system that is comprehensive with capacity across the board for every child who needs it. And we're working on that. We're not quite there yet. And I know this meeting, as the chair said, is on DHSP, and that was the very specific question raised. However, as was noted, we also recognize there are other out-of-school time programs that end up filling in for some parents. How is the communication going to ensure that folks who may have had access to those other programs now may need some support from the city to ensure that students across the city, regardless of the program they were initially scheduled to be in, are going to be able to receive the care and the coverage and the support parents and families needed to ensure that their children, as the Vice Mayor said, have a safe place to go after school starting in the fall, if that makes sense. I'm really curious about the coordination to make sure that even though this is DHSP programs, we talked about the wait list, there may be a need for additional capacity as people's lives have changed a lot over the last year and a half.
Through you, Mr. Chair, a couple of things. I want to say that the general planning, I mentioned in passing that there is now an elementary school network, and under the umbrella of the Agenda for Children, and I see that Kari Milner is one of the attendees today. And one of the exciting things about the elementary school network is that it actually is a place for all of the community programs and families and city programs and schools to take a look at our overarching system. And my guess is that the future planning, the elementary network will play a big role in that. If the question, Councilor Nolan, is how is DHSP going to provide additional programming for families who were intending to be part of another program, I want to be honest that what I was saying is we are doing what we can to hold the capacity we had. And as Michelle described, we're working with the principal of the Cambridgeport School to think about and support what are opportunities for families who were previously enrolled in the CAPI program. But it would be wrong for me to say today that I believe we, the Department of Human Service Programs, are actually going to be able to significantly expand our programs. But that being said, I actually think that there are some opportunities, particularly where resources are at issue, where the problem is programs. And I want to say that with the support of the City Council, City Manager, I'm not sure he's still here, but we provided direct funding over $250,000 this spring to winter and spring to community programs that were serving families who'd been identified through the excellent work of Kari and his team and Robin Harris and her team, and working with principals. Children who were in that point at 4th and 5th grade who needed support at a time in which the schools weren't open to them. And the city funded those programs to be able to ensure that those children could be served. And so again, whether or not it's possible to use resources to help support programs which are struggling is certainly something that we could be exploring. But I don't want to hold out false hope that we have the capacity for September to significantly expand. I think we're doing everything we can to ensure that we're able to meet the same numbers we served before.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And one thing I neglected to say, I really appreciate your honesty too in your opening remarks, also acknowledging there are ways we could have done better about communication. We're learning from this, and yet also acknowledging the stress and strain that every single person in the city has been under, whether you're staff or parent or child. Through the last year and a half, it's been quite challenging. And that the role of the community schools has evolved over time. Some people use it for enrichment and other people use it to ensure a safe place for all the time after school. It is great that the capacity you are seeking, assuming staffing comes into place, will be equal to what it was before as opposed to a decline. A somewhat follow-on question is, what is there may be spots that open up because some people also who had intended to be in DHSP programs, as you said, may not or may have found other avenues for their needs to be met. And what was one thing mentioned by parents in public comment was outreach to new families or to families with young parents who have now entered the system now, and also to non-English speakers to ensure that they are getting the same information that others are. We have a pretty significant number of students and families for whom English and the internet are not the ways that they get their information. So can you just explain some about how it is that we're ensuring that that level of communication is happening for your program so that we're not at risk of leaving some of those parents behind or them not knowing what is coming forward, and that the capacity is there, at least for them if they had any relationship with DHSP programs in the past?
Let me start, and then perhaps Michelle wants to jump in. We had what I would consider to be a pretty successful model for our preschools when we went from a program which was, as many of you know, you signed your child up when your child was 1 year old, and even then you didn't have a guarantee you'd get a slot. It took a while because we ran the wait lists that we had at that moment before. Many of you remember the families who came to talk about the challenges of our not having that system anymore. But I would say we did intensive outreach through all of the housing developments in the city. We used the community engagement team outreach workers. We worked with the family liaisons of the schools. We flyered places where families were, and it changed dramatically the families who applied to the programs for our preschool. And so I would say that we have that model to build on. And we also have the work that we've been doing with the family support folks from the Cambridge Public Schools, who and really talking about Debbie Bonilla and Robin Harris and our own Center for Families. But I think that it is really important how we do outreach. I don't anticipate, as I said, an enormous number of new spots for the fall, but I do think the question of how families learn, and I think Emmy was really clear about that, how families learn about the opportunities and don't get left behind is critically important here.
Thank you. I yield. I really look forward to the future conversations about this and to expanding this so that a few years from now, we will have even greater capacity across the board in coordination. But thank you. I yield to Chair McGovern.
Thank you. Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll be brief. I just wanted to add my voice to the chorus asking for more capacity and for a parent representative body to help ensure that the program moves in the right direction. As you know, my own kids went through the King Open Extended Day program, and we had a great experience. And I've always wondered why we don't make that available to all of our families across the school system. And it's really high time that we get there. So I hope that this crisis is a precipitating event for us to fully fund this program. We have American Rescue Funds. We have other sources of funds that we can use to expand these programs and make sure that every single family in our city has access to these great programs.
Outreach for our preschools that was built on a model that was led by the youth centers in partnership with the police department. And so for 10 years now, twice a year, we do a door knocking campaign in public housing across the city. And that has been a way to ensure that families who may otherwise not be seeking the information get the information. And obviously that was interrupted in COVID. And so something we want to get back to for sure. So not sure if that answers your question fully.
No, thank you. That was helpful, and thanks to everyone for presenting. I'm gonna have to run to another meeting now, but I appreciate everyone coming together and looking forward to working on this one.
Thank you. Before we go back around, just a couple thoughts questions that I have. And I'd be very surprised if you had this information off the top of your head, so don't feel like you have to answer this if you need to take some time. But Ms. Semenoff, you had mentioned that right now we have about 40%, we have a capacity for about 40% of our elementary students. We do also know, obviously, that there are some, there are really great out of school time programs that are not run by DHSP. Do we have a sense of how many of our kids are in some type of program, whether it's DHSP or somewhere else? Do we know that percentage? And then do we have a breakdown of that percentage in terms of income and other race and other demographics?
So I can't give you a complete answer now, but let me just say that some of the people who are attendees right now are people who have worked really hard on that issue, the Agenda for Children. I see that Mercedes Soto, who's done a wonderful job together with Susan Richards and Kari Milner in collecting data from programs and now beginning to collect data from families. And so my 40%, I want to be clear, is a somewhat rough number. And what I was talking about, there are many programs. Let me give an example just so I'm clear. City Sprouts. City Sprouts is a wonderful program. I didn't count enrollment in City Sprouts as a program, although it certainly plays a really important role in the lives of the children who participate in it. When I gave the roughly 40% number, I was giving the number of from the community programs and city programs about basically how many slots there were a day for families who were looking for roughly all day programming. So, and we do have some information, but it's not complete about the breakdowns around income and race. I would say that it varies fairly significantly across different programs. And the data we have is somewhat imperfect because it's not broken out by individual, there are duplicated numbers in there, but I would say at another time, we certainly, together with our Agenda for Children partners, could try to give better information about that. I would say that in the system as a whole, higher income families are, there are more of them than there are lower income families, and that varies by program. And I think, as you know, it varies by grade level in the schools themselves. And so if you were trying to understand, you'd need to look at all of that.
Yeah. Thank you. And I just think as we think about what we need to do moving forward, you know, to expand programs, and then also to, you know, think about the children who would benefit the most from being in these programs. Having that data is an important. We got to know where we are before we know where we're going. So I appreciate that. Excuse me. Another thing about the community schools, and I think this is probably still true, although you know, it was at least true a year and a half or 2 years ago, is it also the community schools, because they're somewhat independent, also have different fee structures and charge differently, right? And so that's something also to think about. If you go to a school where, you know, the community school, you know, if you're a lower income caregiver whose child goes to a school where that community school charges much more money for their classes than another school, you know, that's an inequity that, you know, that we have to think about. And I don't know if they all subsidize the same way or how exactly that works, but I could be wrong, but I seem to remember that there were some that were more expensive than others. And how do we make sure that there's some equity around that? Am I wrong about that? I think that's the way it used to be anyway.
Michelle, do you want to take that?
Sure. Thank you for that question. I would say that it's sort of correct what you said, but not entirely. I would say for the last 2 years, the fees have actually been the same. And so Raj Shoy, who leads the community schools, had done a lot of work to actually make sure that if you're taking drumming at Tobin and drumming at Kalo, that it is the same price. And so the prices are have not been widely different over the last 2 years. And that being said, the idea that the cost for the enrichment program is really kind of an a la carte model, right? Where depending on the things that you choose would significantly impact what your tuition is something that we're also looking at. And so when I talked earlier about that we are moving towards a sliding fee scale, what that means is that what will dictate your tuition is your income and your family size, not the classes that you choose. And that's across the board. And we're looking to create that sliding scale fee, which we did this summer for all of our camps. So all of our camps are now sharing the same fee structure and tuition structure. And so we're looking to do that for all of our programs in the fall as well. So that would mean community schools, youth centers, and our after-school programs.
Thank you. And do you have I know we always talk about 100% AMI and 80% AMI, and you know, it changes, but most people, I mean, I can't even remember in my head because it changes what exactly that means. So in terms of for families or, you know, caregivers who in that sliding scale that receives sort of the lowest, with free. Well, I don't know if it's free or if it's what do you have to, if you got 2 kids, like what's that income level, and how do we make sure that people know that, so that they, they might think, oh, I'm not going to qualify, but actually some of those numbers are pretty high in Cambridge because our AMI is high. So there's probably a lot more people who will qualify for things than they may think. So do you know what that number is, and how are we getting that out to people?
Yeah, so this summer, we did post that as part of on our website. When people were looking to sign up, we had the tuition scale there, which talked about your family size, your income level, and then what your tuition would be. Ellen, I think that you're looking at it and I'm not. I was like, I can tell you what it is, but you might have a better number than me.
For example, if you wanted to know for a family of 3, what's 100% of the area median income, it's $107,000. So for our preschools, and we expect to have a related version for all of our after school programs. When we redid, we were already a relatively inexpensive preschool, as many of you know, compared to pretty much any other preschools around. When we redid the numbers, families who were, we didn't increase the rate for families below 100% of median income. So we deeply discounted the rate for everybody much lower, and we increased the rates for families who were, for example, the first place families started to feel an increase was for a three-person family. It would have been above $128,000. So we deeply discounted and then increased a lot for families that were above $250,000 for a family of 3. So we don't have it exactly yet but we expect to do a modified version of what we did for the preschool to apply to the after school. So we expect that families who paid a certain amount and are at a certain income level won't see theirs increase, and other families will see a significant decrease in what it would cost.
Okay, thank you. And just sort of my last comment, and then I'll go back around if others, if there are other folks, other counselors, just raise your hand so I know if you want to say something else. Just a thought on the communication piece. I can't remember exactly what it was for. Maybe it was Envision when we were doing the Envision outreach, but I remember at some point back when schools were open, that we had set up, for whatever the issue was, we had set up tables in the schools with staff that was there with a computer that as people came in said, hey, do you want to take this survey, or do you want to sign up? I forget again, I'm forgetting exactly why we did that. But that might be something we want to think about too at the beginning, because, to actually, filling out these applications. And I mean, I did them for my kids, and there were parts, and I'm pretty savvy at this stuff, and there were parts of it that I didn't quite, exactly are they asking here? And there were some glitches, and there were some things that I had to kind of, so it's, it would have been that much harder for me if English wasn't my first language, or I wasn't as used to doing this kind of work. So maybe that's one way of also reaching out, is actually, let's, whether it's the family liaisons or staff, community engagement team members, the first week of school, set up a table in Kalo or wherever, every school, and say, if you want to sign up for an after school program, we're here to help you do it. We actually saw some numbers increase when we did that before. So I think it's just something to think about. I know it's more work and you guys are working terribly hard, but it might be a way of really being more proactive and helping folks that might otherwise feel like they're not going to do it. Anyway, just a thought. Kick it back to Vice Mayor Mallon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. I do want to just touch on the tenuousness piece that one of the public commenters called in and spoke about. I think I'm going to just admit it right here. I was very surprised that the Cambridgeport had a sort of private after school within it that was outside of the community school, and that it could just kind of go like that based on, you know, maybe some financial issues or others. Are there other after-school programs like CAPI in the city? I feel like there is one at Graham Parks, but are there others in the city? And if so, where are they? And how do we ensure that something like this doesn't happen again, where an after-school program that serves 50 families really well just disappears sort of overnight?
I can start, and Michelle, if you have more to answer. I would say that as far as I know, there are just 2 privately run licensed after-school programs in the schools, Dragonfly at the Graham Parks and CAPI. And I would say that Dragonfly is very connected to the Agenda for Children, and the program is sort of, I would say, deeply rooted. And so I suspect that had there been, we would have some warning. CAPI was actually disconnected from any of the city and community related professional development. And so we were aware it was there, but it really wasn't part of the network of after school programs. So that's just one there. As far as I know, there are no others in the school. And I would say we all have some information about the community after school programs and the tenuous nature for many of those programs during the pandemic. And we don't have any information right now that suggests any of those programs are going to close, but it is also true that since many, but not all of those programs focus predominantly on low-income families, to the extent that their state funding changes over time, there are significant challenges that they face. And I think that it's important for us to have some understanding of how programs are doing. And I think that as you know, the Not-for-Profit Coalition has a group of those programs, which is, again, deeply connected with the Agenda for Children, so that the information about programs is much more shared.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I guess we could have a larger conversation at another time about our nonprofits that do this amazing work in the community. I guess I was just more thinking about, are there other programs that exist within schools like CAPI? And it sounds like only Dragonfly at the Graham Parks is in a similar situation, but unlike CAPI, they are more deeply connected to DHSP, and we would have sort of more of a warning sign. We would be able to, jump in and help. I think this one just took us all by surprise. And so I think just understanding the landscape, it makes me feel a little bit better that there isn't another CAPI out there waiting to, pull the rug out from 50 families. And I'm not saying that as any slight against the director or the folks that worked in CAPI. I think it was a really hard decision that was made. And I know that there were so many families that loved that program. I just wanted to make sure there weren't, 5 or 6 others in the Cambridge community that we should be worried about at this point. I think that was really my other last sort of question. So I'll go back at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilor Nolan, anything? Oh, your hand is up. There you are. Your box moved. So I go ahead.
Thank you, Chair McGovern and Michelle and Ellen and everyone who's contributed. The long-term vision, I think, should be or could be that when any parent in the city, of course, this leaves out the independent schools and charter schools, but certainly all of us in the Cambridge Public Schools, I know Chair McGovern and Vice Mayor Mallon and I certainly filled these out, and I think now they're online. That big packet you get every year to enroll your child could be connected to and tied to, what are you doing for after school? I certainly had to fill out, because my kids did go to Dragonfly. We had to fill out, well, where does the bus go? Because you're not bringing them home, you're actually bringing them to the after school. Another amazing thing that this city does for parents to allow us to have seamless connection, to basically be driven by buses, if you're eligible for a bus, to anywhere in the city, to ensure that you are delivered to your after school program. So I'm just saying, as a long-term vision, I think would be great to have, again, this seamless coordination between the school district, and recognizing there are, last I checked, 20 to 25% of our students are not enrolled in our regular public schools. They're in independent or parochial or the public charter schools. But again, at least within CPS, it would be great to have your programs and all of us work to ensure that we have that information. We've always had this dream, right, of ensuring that there's a connection, so that if my child's experiencing a hard day at school, the after school program might know, you know, that on so many different levels, the more connection we can have between schools and the after school providers is good. So I'm hoping that that might be a project. Again, I recognize not for now, but eventually that we won't need to have this conversation. Every single student, we will know where they are going after school, what they're tied into, and ensure that they are in a place, if the parents want some kind of after school care, that there's a place for them, that the capacity is such that it can meet them all.
Thank you. And if I could just say, again, I don't want to sound entirely like a broken record, but the Agenda for Children actually has been in the forefront of creating with the school department the partner portal, in helping to provide information both about young people and what programs they're enrolled in. And I do think that there is more opportunity, and that's actually not just about DHSP programs, because again, really important to look at the full landscape of our programs. And that is one of the wonderful things about the agenda, is that although deeply connected to us, DHSP, really connected as well to all of the out of school time programs across the city.
Right. I know it's in process. I've heard from some parents it's not always as seamless as we'd like. And so it's a work in progress. And so I'm just looking forward to when, again, it's pretty seamless and you sign up for school and then it's almost automatic that you know all the options for after school care as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions from counselors? Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for the work you do every day. All 4 of my kids have been part of these programs in one capacity or another, and I really appreciate that. We have obviously some work to do, but I think folks are all on board and doing that work, which is great. And I know, I think there's we appreciate and respect, I think, and certainly as a parent, the desire and the anxiety around planning for where your kids are going to be and what you're going to do, and you want these things locked in as soon as possible, because there's a lot of, if you don't get a spot or something, there's a lot of, stuff you got to do, right? And so I appreciate, I understand personally, as well as politically and professionally, the urgency that parents are feeling. And I understand that, as you pointed out, Ms. Seminoff, that you've got, your staff is doing 6,000 things, all at the same time. So as much as I want to, and I do encourage DHSP to, work as quickly as possible to get information out to people and try to get these things done as soon as possible, I also want to ask parents to please try to be patient. We will get this figured out. We typically always do, in one way or another. And, people are really trying and working hard to resolve some of this stuff for September. So I think we'll get there, and I appreciate it. We can certainly, if there's an interest, I'm always happy to hold a human services meeting. If there's an interest in talking more about our out of school time partners, or some of the issues around equity in these programs, we certainly can do that. Happy to do that. Folks feel free to reach out to me, and I will certainly be reaching out to people myself. But again, thank you very much. And if there's nothing further, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
On a motion by the Vice Mayor to adjourn, roll call.
On adjournment, Councilman,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Mallon? Yes. Councilor Nolan?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Simmons? Absent. Councilor Toomey?
Yes.
Yes. And on the affirmative vote with 4 in favor, the meeting is adjourned at 12:43.
Thank you all. Stay cool.
Thank you, Mark.
Right.